Independence, impartiality, my colleagues will talk about it. There is no independence and impartiality of those who appointed the bodies or the individuals appointed in key recommendation implementation. We talk about ombudsman, we talk about inspector general in both police and NSA, national security apparatus, we talk about special unit. These are not in compliance with the requirement of to be independent, impartial, the bodies and the individual. Police reform, we know that Bahrain's community is diverse, but the police is only from one element of Bahrain mainly, and from expat. So we have to, my running out of time. Yeah. Key recommendation is not met, and these key recommendations, because they are not met, and benchmarking before BICI and after BICI is not different, maybe worse. I will conclude with why the government failed, because they wanted just to mark themselves as being implemented, but because the international community is not putting an assertive pressure to make the Bahraini government do its work. It's not coincident that we are here in Hague. One of the recommendations that being put forward in Geneva during the Universal Periodical Review from 6 states at least to push Bahrain to ratify ICC. I think ICC ratification for Bahrain, we demand that, and it will open up a roadmap to independence of judicial, reform of police, better conduct of those authorities. So I will leave it here for my colleagues to give more details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. Dr. Nada?
Thank you, Niccolo, and thank you, No Peace Without Justice, for giving us this opportunity for our voices to be heard here in Hague. The worsening reality of post-Bassiouni's commission in Bahrain, what's the best way to explain it to you rather than speak about the medical and healthcare system in Bahrain, which it will give you a clue about what's happening on the ground. To begin with the crackdown that started immediately after the uprising in Bahrain, the crackdown on health care services started and still continuing. It's really important to mention that doctors were targeted. They're still suffering. Some of our colleagues are spending time in jail. As I'm speaking to you right now, there's 6 of them. They're spending jail sentencing up to 5 years in imprisonment. It's also important to mention that the hospital, who was under military occupation during the crackdown, February and March 2011, still continuing. The main hospital in Bahrain still under military occupation. The patients, and there's a certain sect in Bahrain, and we're talking Shia here, they're still afraid to seek treatment at the hospital. They're afraid that they will be kidnapped from hospital and taken to jail, or they will be prosecuted. Especially if their injuries are suspected to be happening or as a result of protesting. Also, the private hospitals are not safe. The private hospitals are required to report any cases that is suspected to result from demonstration. To give you a clue about this situation, I will present some cases. These are fresh cases that happened a few weeks back, up to 2 weeks, very recent cases. And it's very alarming and very concerning. The reason I'm showing these cases, we need to act and act immediately, because some of these cases are really life-threatening conditions. The denial of medical treatment to demonstrators. Patients are being arrested from hospitals, and here we have almost two similar cases. We have Ahmed Magabi and Adnan al-Mansi. Both of them were brutally sexually harassed by the security forces. Ahmed al-Magabi, who's 50 years old, was sentenced for 3.5 years in imprisonment because he offered refuge to one of the wanted political leaders, al-Maqdad. He was badly tortured, he was electrocuted, and he was, guess what? He was electrocuted as his genitals. He was badly sexually harassed. They enforced, there's no gentle way to say it, that they inserted a hose in his anus, and he's suffering a very bad hemorrhage, bleeding and hemorrhoids. Also, Adnan al-Mansi, he's 22 years old, and he suffered almost the same behavior. And both cases are having a temporary paralysis. We've been very alarmed by their conditions, and they need immediate treatment. Another case which is Ibrahim Saleh. He was protesting and holding Bahraini flag, which I don't think a flag is a weapon. He was beaten badly by the Riyadh police, and he was charged for illegal gathering. It's a very big crime in Bahrain to gather and protest. He was interrogated in the hospital. During the protest, he was peppered with the shotgun, and it was directly at his genitals. And from the hospital, he was kidnapped, handcuffed, and taken to prison. And not prison, he was interrogated at the police station. He was missing for 4 days, and then after, the family got to know that he was in prison. Up till this moment, he didn't receive any medical treatment. Also, another funny case, but not funny, funny, but funny peculiar, which is Hussein Shamsan. This guy wasn't even protesting. He was just standing right in front of his house, and it happened that they were demonstrating in his area. The Riyadh police came and they shot everybody, and he received shots at his eye, chest, and waist. He went to hospital seeking treatment, and from hospital he was handcuffed and he was tortured and taken to prison after he was badly beaten and electrocuted and forced to sign false confessions saying that he assaulted a police officer, and the police officer kept on threatening him, calling himself, well, you're here, I'm the butcher, and I'm going to kill you, and he received death threats. The reason why we're showing these cases, not to end up with a catastrophe, which really happened in Bahrain. This is the last case, promise. The last case, which is of Mohammed Mshemia, who actually died in prison because of lack of medical treatment and poor medical services, who's 22 years old. He suffers from bad sickle cell, very severe sickle cell anemia. This young man, who's a father of a newborn baby, was accused of illegal protesting. The lawyers, they proved and sent documents that he was at the hospital at the time of alleged crimes, and yet he was sentenced for 7 years imprisonment. The lawyers sent many documents, and here you have the documents that his condition is really severe and he needs immediate treatment, but this young man ended up dying in the Bahraini prisons. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nada, also for putting human face and concrete to the concrete examples of the, let's say, human consequences of the repression. So, Mr. Hamid Al-Mullah, I mentioned, is the president of the Bar Association. Quel est le bon cable? Ah.
Thank you very much. طبعا الأستاذ خليل تعرض بشكل كامل تقريبا عن تقرير بسيوني، وكان ودي ان انا اضيف بعض الشغلات ولكن الامور يعني ذكرها الاستاذ خليل.
Khalil already mentioned most of the things that Hamid was going to speak about in regards to the BICI report and how it was implemented, but now he's just going to give some additions to what was already said.
طبعا مثل ما تعرفون بأن تقرير البسيوني أخذ فترة من الوقت لإعداده، وبشكل حرفي يعني تم التوصل إلى خلاصات نقدر نقول ممتازة، واستطاع أن يعني يوثق كثير من الحالات التي كان بالإمكان يعني تجاوز الأحداث من خلالها، عندما قرر كثير من الأمور التي كان في نهاية الأمر للأسف الشديد لم تطبق.
The BICI report documented a lot of issues and cases. It took them some time and they did it very professionally, and there were a lot of cases that, had they not been documented by the BICI report, probably would have been not documented later on either, so they would have been overlooked.
طبعا أثناء عمل لجنة طوال الأشهر التي عملوا فيها كانت هناك انتهاكات مستمرة، وحدثت حالات وفاة أيضا، راح ضحية العديد طبعا من الضحايا، واستمرت الأجهزة الأمنية في ملاحقة النشطاء والسياسيين نشطاء حقوق الإنسان.
What's interesting is that even at the time when the BICI Commission was doing their investigations and looking at the violations on the ground, because they were looking at a specific period of time, the violations continued to happen, and there were actually several cases where people were subjected to extrajudicial killings, and the harassment and targeting of human rights defenders continued as well during the time of the investigations of the BICI report.
ومع ذلك يعني عمل اللجنة استمر، ويعني قدم تقريره في الوقت يعني ما بعد تأجيل، يمكن يكون مرة أو مرتين، قدم تقريره في 23 يعني قبل سنة تقريبا.
And after the doing of the report, of course, there were 2 different delays that happened, but then it was eventually released on the 23rd of November last year.
مطالعة التقرير والتوصيات اللي توصل إليها الدكتور بسيوني، نجد بأن كثير من التوصيات لو الدولة أخذت بها في تلك الفترة لاجتزنا كثير من الصعاب اللي ما زلنا الآن نعيشها.
Looking at the BICI report and the recommendations that were made, had the Bahraini government decided to actually implement these recommendations and go through the violations that they accepted as a report, we would have been able, the country would have been able to overcome a lot of difficulties that we are facing today.
فعلى سبيل المثال يعني هناك توصية تتعلق بالمتابعة منتهكي حقوق الإنسان، بمتابعة المعذبين. للأسف الشديد أن الدولة التفت على هذه التوصية وقدمت مجموعة صغيرة من الضباط إلى المحاكمة، وأيضا فشلت في أن تقدم الدليل على إدانتهم، مما يعني جعلهم يدخلوا من يعني باب المحكمة ويدخلوا من النافذة بالبراءة.
For example, one of the recommendations of the BICI report spoke about holding people who were allegedly involved in cases of torture accountable for their crimes. But what actually happened in reality is that only a few people, usually from lower class or lower divisions within the police force, were brought into court. But then most of the time they were also either found innocent or acquitted, and so there was no justice served.